Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 16th, 2023 Planning Board meeting. Could we first please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I do have to mention that our next meeting, which is November 6th, right?
Yeah.
Will be at the Albert Capellini Building in room 104. We tried to have them have the booth for the election outside under a tent, but we lost that. All right, first we have on the agenda the meeting minutes of October 2nd, 2023. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Any issues, concerns? John?
Nothing here.
Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of October 2nd, 2023?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't know, do I abstain because I wasn't there, or, I guess,
Yeah.
okay.
Next, we were going to go into executive session. As we don't have council tonight, we're going to put that off. So we'll move into the regular portion of our meeting. First up, we have the Colangelo subdivision. This is a request for a second 90-day time extension. Location is 1805 Jacob Road.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jerry Tortorella, the attorney for the project, sent in a letter explaining the status of getting the easements in place for the trail connection. There's still tied up, and their progress has been slow on that, so we're going to need more time.
Any questions from the board?
No,
None here.
John?
Nothing here.
That being said, do we have a request to approve the second 90-day time extension for the Colangelo subdivision?
Motion.
second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
Next on the agenda, we have the Catalog Building. This is discussion of outdoor seating. Location is 1929 Commerce Street. We did see this at the last meeting. How are you?
Terry Kuzikov, the property owner. Would you be able to bring it up? I didn't have a chance to look at it. So subsequent to our last meeting, we submitted some additional information that was requested, materials on creating a parking schedule. At this point, the parking count will be 51 parking spaces once the plaza area is constructed, where 58 would be required based on our calculation. And we've also filed a special use permit and fee for that, for the outdoor seating.
What's approved on the site now, in terms of parking spaces?
I think the original site plan was 49.
49.
So that's what's currently approved on there,
That was
Yes.
what was approved in 1960,
in 60,
on or about 1960.
okay. That's before your time, huh?
Thanks.
Oh, boy.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Any questions or concerns?
No, I think this will work out very good because, you know, it was like streetscape.
Yeah.
That's what we need. This is what we're looking for all the time. Starbucks got it across the street. You would have it, open to the public, walk along, take a seat, have a coffee. Sounds good to me.
Have you seen the resolution?
Yes.
Any concerns, John?
No concerns with what you have in your hand. I just wanted to raise one issue that I did speak with the owner about a number of months ago, but also just earlier tonight, is I think he intends on constructing a refuse enclosure in the back where the refuse containers are, and it is in need of it, and so I would suggest to just make a condition that they submit the detail of the construction of that they are planning to do, and that it at least gets put on the plan so that we have a record of it, but that will help clean up the back in there. I think it'll go a long way, and I think the owner had that in mind before we suggested it, and so I think it works out for everybody.
Yeah, the building's really, it looks very nice now. Okay, so no one's got any concerns, comments with this?
No.
So do I have a motion for the resolution approving the special use permit for the outdoor seating at the Catalo Building as described in the one change from John Tegeter?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you, John.
How did I get that?
You don't have it?
No. I think Ian took it out of the book. He's pulling a Tom.
Where's mine? Is that it?
Do I have a motion to move from the regular session into the work session, please?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, first in the work session, we have Nantucket Sound Sons. This is a discussion of a proposed field changes, location 385 Kear Street.
You want to put it off to the end?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move that. Next, we have the Stammer subdivision, Kane Residence. This is a discussion of residential site plan, locations 535 Jerome Road.
There's one in the third row here.
All right, we'll put you to. Okay, next we have Guiding Eyes for the Blind. This is a training school kennel. Discussion of site plan. Location is 3241 Compound Road. Thank you.
You're
That was the
welcome.
tree memo?
Yeah.
I heard about this. Yep. See that? I have.
Mhm.
I do have that.
Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
The book's up to date.
See? I didn't have the reso, but I had the tree.
Okay, all set. Thank you. When we met the last time, we were directed to meet with the staff to discuss in a little more detail what we were thinking of doing to address some of the buffer screening concerns and some more information, or fill in some more information on the sound study that was done by Cerami. So with me tonight is Abigail Adams. She's here to explain what she has done to the landscape plan to enhance the buffering. And Samit Gawali? Gawali is here from Cerami to answer any questions or give you a little more background in the sound study that was done.
Before we move on, have you seen
ahead.
the letter from the Tree Conservation Advisory Commission?
I did.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay, Abigail, you want
Good evening. For the record, Abigail Adams, registered landscape architect, owner of A2 Land Consulting. So, based on some of the questions and concerns that came up from the commission as well as the neighbor, we've made some revisions to the landscape plan. Tony Russo and I met out at the site. We walked the southern property line, and we took a look at some of the existing vegetation, what was going on, and our original landscape buffer that we had proposed, the evergreen trees right at the top of the slope. What we came up with and what seems to make the most sense based on the comments is to actually take that evergreen screening and pull it all the way to the southern property line. So you can see that both on the plan and in the cross section. What we've done is propose to remove a 10-foot wide strip of existing vegetation that there's a lot of scrubby material, invasive things like that. Leave any trees that are there, work around the trees, and then put in a strip of evergreen trees along that southern property line, so it becomes a really nice clean edge for the neighbor. And I know that was one of the questions and concerns that were coming up. So we are doing that for a certain distance up the southern property line. It made sense from close to the wetland line up to that. And then we have a clouded area that you can see on the plan where it makes the most sense. That's where the driveway kind of curves and turns to the east. We're going to, there's not too much understory scrub in there, so what we think makes the most sense is to actually just infill that with a lot of native plant material. We're proposing several things, including 5 eastern red buds, 15 witch hazel, 15 gray dogwood, 15 winterberry, 20 mock orange, 20 bottle brush buckeye, 12 American hazelnuts, and then 12 Hatfield yews. Those aren't particularly native, but those do have evergreen. They are evergreen, and they will help to fill in that area and can handle all of the shade. We'd want to do some selective pruning of branches just to get a little more light in for this material, but we think that'll be a really nice, dense understory planting that's nice and clean looking, native, and will look really nice for the neighbor. So all of that will be between the property line and the additional buffer screening that we already have around the access drive and on that southwestern corner there. In the we provided the cross section as requested, which shows the lower portion of the building. We come across to the parking lot. You can see the slope, existing trees, and then you can see where we're putting the evergreen buffer right along the property line. Again, creating a nice clean edge along that southern line, and then the understory that's happening along the flat area before you get to the slope would just stay the natural vegetation that it is for maintenance purposes. We felt leaving the evergreen buffer where we originally had it and cleaning out all of that scrubby invasive material and trying to maintain that would be pretty cumbersome, so it made sense. Let's get the screening all the way to the property line, clean edge, and then we can leave the understory as it is and not disturb that. So those are the major changes that we have proposed. So we end up having quite a few additional shrubs that are being added to the planting plan, a total of 372 shrub plantings, 248 perennials and grasses, 76 evergreen trees, 7 understory ornamental trees, and 12 canopy trees on the property. So quite a significant planting plan.
That really tells a story there.
It does.
Yes.
Yeah. How is the slope itself going to be treated? That's like a 1-on-2 slope, or?
Yes, yes, yes. We are treating that slope with actually a roadside matrix mix, so that can be either mown biannually or it can be left alone. It has both grass, perennial, and shrub seeds in it, so there's dogwoods and things like that to really stabilize that slope.
So that'll be sprayed after it's graded, and
Correct.
And then it'll grow naturally.
That's correct.
So what's What's the difference in elevation there that you're showing, and where are you showing that? What's, that's section A?
Yes. Yep, section AA. That's where we're coming across there. I don't have that.
It's about 20 something feet.
Do you have the grading plan, Joe? That might help us out a little bit.
Here's the section line
Right, I think John was asking what the elevation difference is between the parking lot and the top of the slope.
It's like 14 feet or something.
Wouldn't that if the car's in scale?
Parking lot is at like 450 feet, 459. It's up at 482.
So 22 or 3 feet?
Yes. Yes.
That's all cut?
This is all cut, yes.
Any concerns?
I just remember it a little less, but no, I mean, it is what it is, so.
Yeah, I think what's not,
What's a little deceiving about the profile, there's a little bit, there's more of a grade change, so from the top of the cut up to the property line, there's probably a slope,
Okay.
a grade change there.
Oh.
Right, that shows it
It's
flat,
shown flat, but it's more of a
but it's
grade.
really a grade.
So to the property line, it's 22 feet. Your actual cut is more in the neighborhood of 15 or so?
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
That's where we are, we're about 15 feet
Okay.
at the most, yeah.
Got it.
Great.
Any questions?
No questions here.
I think so.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask Sumit Gwali to come up from Cerami Engineers to give some background on the sound study, and then can answer any questions you have.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Sumit Gawali, and I'm from Cerami and Associates. We're based out of New York City, Midtown. We have been doing acoustic consulting services for the past around 60 years now. We do just a quick background of our company that we do noise and vibration control for a lot of projects all over the United States. Some projects in Canada, some projects in Asia, also a couple of projects dabbling here and there in the South Asian region. So we were contacted by Guiding Eyes because there's a very obvious concern with especially the dogs when they're let outside. Would that be a concern to the neighboring properties? To assess this concern, our goal was to first assess what the ambient noise levels are existing in the neighboring property. So we made a visit down to the adjacent properties. Also had a chance to meet one of the owners, but we measured in a couple locations. One of the locations was comparatively closer to the proposed location, as you can see in the figure on the screen there. And we measured for 24 hours what the ambient noise levels are, how do they vary around the clock, and came up with when trying to assess the concern, we chose the lowest possible ambient sound, which we don't want to exceed when we have the facility up and running. The next thing that we did is we visited the actual existing facilities, facility of Guiding Eyes, and did some measurements. We measured inside when the dogs were inside their cages. It is interesting because every time a person, for example, a new person walks in, the dogs get very excited and can get very loud. So we were able to, I can safely say that we were able to measure, let's say, the loudest possible sound that you can think of inside. The other thing that we were also able to do was measure when the dogs are actually let out twice a day. And we were told by the facility that they are usually the loudest at their 4 p.m. time. So we were able to actually make a visit during that time and measure, I would say at least the most 5 feet from any dog, and there were at least 15, 20 dogs outside. The most interesting thing that I found comparing the two noise levels inside versus outside is the dogs are way more louder inside because they're in cage, all ready to basically go out and have fun. But when they're actually let out, they're not that loud. So we assessed both conditions. What would happen if we had to project the noise levels from the dogs inside, going through our facade, going through our glass to the closest residential property, and then we also assessed what would the noise levels be when their dogs are actually outside, and what happens at the residential property. Are we gonna be above the ambient, causing disturbance to the neighbor, or are we going to be okay in terms of not exceeding that ambient noise levels? So we did some assessments. What you see on the screen, the table, location 1 and 2, are actually the ambient readings that we actually measured at the residential property lines. And then next we follow that up with the current design intent as to what are we doing in the new facility to improve or let's say to reduce the noise transfer that we can possibly expect. So we are doing absorption inside the space, which is going to help with the noise buildup. The noise will not build as much as the current facility has, because the current facility does not have any absorption in the space. But for the new facility, we are planning for absorption inside.
One moment, just one quick question. Just go back to one, I thought you said something about the ambient.
Yes,
Okay, so you went back, can you go back to the chart you had up?
page 3, table 2.
Whatever it was.
No,
Okay. What page is that?
page 3, table number 2.
On which report?
This is the noise survey report.
Okay, mine differs somewhat, but I think on page 3 of the August 25th report, August 24th report,
There was an update to that report. The latest version we have is from October 9th.
all right. That is table 2, measured noise levels at neighboring residential property.
Correct.
Is that ambient?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. So
Sorry for the
moving.
interruption.
You're okay. Moving on, in addition to the absorption, we also, wherever we have glass along the facade, we are also gonna pursue insulating glazing. So insulated glazing, just for record, is 2 panes of glass separated by an airspace. And the last thing that we, based on our assessment, we felt the need to have an acoustic screen wall to block some of that noise transferring to the adjacent residential properties. Based on our analysis, it has to be 8 feet tall and mainly focused along the southern edge of the facility. Yards 5B and 6B are the 2 yards that will be enclosed on all sides, because there's possible noise transfer from all sides of that dog run or yard. And then yard 4A, 4B, 7A, and 7B will only be enclosed on the southern parts, because all the other sides of the yards are shielded by buildings. And then the eastern and the west, let's say the extreme right and the extreme left yard that you see, the faces that are not shielded, based on our analysis, the southernmost face of that yard is the controlling factor, where we will control the noise. So in pink, what you see, again, just to recap on the screen, the plan view that you have in pink is where we are considering to put the acoustic screen wall to shield against the noise from dogs when they actually are let out during a couple times in a day.
What's the acoustic screen wall made out of?
So it is insulated metal panels. So it has 2 metal panels, and then it has insulation in between, fiberglass in between. Any kind of like highway barriers that you see when you like, but they're super tall, so they're very apparent. You can see them, and then they're like, oh, I don't like the look of it. But for us, we have trees around. It's only 8 foot tall, so we don't expect that to be a big of a concern aesthetically.
Your section that you're showing here, it doesn't appear, because your section line on the plan doesn't go all the way into where we just talked about the grade change and the cut. Do your calculations take into account the benefit of that distance and the elevation change?
Yes, we have. Unfortunately, especially the western side, let's say the western half of the plan, we don't have that much big of an elevation change. It starts from the midpoint and then kind of starts going up. So we do have some benefit on the eastern plan east side of the facility, but just to be consistent and reduce any possibility of that noise transfer, we're going to treat the southern faces of yards, the easternmost yards as well.
So on the middle two, in which you're treating the 3 sides, and let's take the westernmost yard in which you're only treating the southern one. What is the difference between the two in which it was apparent to you that you needed to treat all 3 sides on the middle ones, but not the westernmost one, for
Right.
instance?
Right. So in terms of our analysis and in terms of noise transfer, or let's say the noise levels that are experienced by a receiver, direct line of sight affects how well you can hear a sound. If sound has to go, let's say, around a barrier and then turn towards you, it's gonna be comparatively, the levels are gonna be way lesser than if let's say you were looking at something directly. So that's where the middle two, the three sides for the middle 2 yards kind of come into picture, because I think in terms of the location of the residential property, they are very close. If let's assume there was no vegetation in between the two, you would have direct line of sight between those 2 yards and then the residential properties. So even when we considered the extra distance sound would have to travel to go around that barrier, if you only treated the southernmost part, we still were exceeding the ambient noise level. So we made it a point that we would treat all 3 sides of those yards. Now, talking about the western side, when we calculated the distance the sound had to travel around that barrier based on those distance losses, we would not expect ambient noise level exceedance from dogs. So, but on the southernmost part, if you had, let's say, your sound traveling directly from the southern face to your residential property, then we were having some exceedance. So we treated only the southernmost part of that yard.
So what we're using is the figures from table 1 on page 2, I guess, which is the outdoor average and outdoor maximum. Is that correct? That's what you are claiming you experience at the existing site when you're about 5 feet from 15 to 20 dogs.
Yes.
And you're saying that's 72 to 78. Is that the average that we're using generally? Or
It's not.
are you using the highest number across the table?
So sound does behave differently depending on what frequency it is. Most of our noise levels in terms of dogs were kind of centered around 500 hertz. So if you look at that frequency, the level is actually 106. Pretty, if you think about it, in terms of noise levels, it's pretty loud.
That's the indoor, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What about the outdoor?
Outdoor would be 71 and 77 that we have shown that we were experiencing.
And so just explain why that's such a reduction if you're standing 5 feet from 10 dogs, 1 time inside, 1 time outside.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I got to earlier. It is pretty interesting, the difference between what the dogs do inside versus the dogs do outside. When they see a new visitor, they're loud, they're super happy, and I also went in right before the 4 p.m. time when they're let out, where they're like absolutely ready to go out and have fun. So seeing me as a stranger, they were super excited, making the loudest noise. The other thing that kind of factors in is this current facility does not have any absorption, does not have any absorptive treatment or either the walls or the ceilings. So when you get reflections from all those surfaces, sound increases. The sound levels that you actually experience increases. When you actually come outside, when a dog barks, the sound disperses, and the sound that you actually perceive is way lesser than what you would hear, let's say, in an enclosed space.
Okay.
So all the walls are going to be, have sound absorption on it and the ceiling, everything?
Can you go to that section? So we're not planning for absorption on the walls, mainly because based on at the moment, if you look at it, most of the walls they don't even have walls inside the cage, where the dogs are kept. They have cages, so then dogs are inside the cages, and they're partial height walls. So if you think about sound kind of funneling towards the ceiling, that's where most of the sound is being focused from every single cage. So in this new facility, our goal is to add absorption at the ceiling. So we are going to absorb sound that hits that ceiling and not let it bounce back to on the floor and to the listener.
So the interior portion of the external walls will not have sound absorption on it?
No, it will be the glass portion, which usually is the weakest point in the facade, will be 1-inch IGU, which will reduce the sound below the ambient levels. But no, to answer your question, no absorption on the walls.
No absorption on the walls, but what about the wall construction? Does that have some mitigative factors in terms of the transmission through the wall?
Yes, so at the moment we have an 8-inch CMV wall. So the 8-inch CMV stands for concrete masonry unit. So for that CMV wall, we will have enough attenuation, and we also have projected noise levels through that wall, and we don't exceed ambient levels. So that is, if you go to the next page, real quick, to the graph. So I think looking at it visually will probably make more sense. So the indoor maximum, that's the green solid line, the indoor maximum when we project it. And that's the indoor maximum that you saw was 106 decibels inside. When projected through that CMV wall and that 1-inch IGU glass, whatever you have along that facade will be reduced down to 30 dBA based on our, close to 30 dBA based on our analysis.
Okay, that's from the inside.
Yes.
Okay. So a couple questions on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
The table that's below that chart, table 3, that is, as I understand it, that's the projected mitigated noise levels at the two measuring points on the neighboring property.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Projecting your source noise from your measurements at the existing facility and taking into account the sound walls that you're using.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So you're starting, in terms of your source noise, in the 71, 77 range, and you're achieving somewhere between 37 and 32, depending on whether it's a single dog or an average of 10 dogs.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
What I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mike, couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
The sound is additive in a way. So if you have 10 dogs barking at once, they're going to be louder than the loudest dog. So why would the average be lower than the single dog? And if you have a bunch of dogs barking at the same time, will it be a little bit louder?
So the average doesn't, the average that we're talking here doesn't mean an average of 10 dogs. What it means is when you have 10 dogs outside, the average means it's an average over a time period. What are your experiences, let's say, in a 10-minute window or in a minute window? What are the noise levels that you're experiencing on an average? And in addition to that, we have also used, the maximum that you were referring to from a single dog. the other interesting factor that we found is not all dog barks are around the same levels. Not all dog barks are centered in that same frequencies. So it was important for us to assess it a couple different ways, which is why we used, okay, this was the loudest a dog was, and then this is what an average would be.
Okay. And at the 32 or the 37 or somewhere between there, wouldn't that level add to the ambient level? In other words, if the ambient level is in the 42, 41 range or 48, aren't we raising that level by virtue of adding the 37 or the 32 relative to the dogs between the source, which is mostly Crampon Road, and now this facility?
Yeah, so the scale that we're using to represent the noise levels is logarithmic. So just to explain it, when we have a 10 dB increase, that's when we get twice as loud. And the addition that you're talking about is not, and you probably already know, is not going to be your regular arithmetic addition, but it's going to be a decibel addition, if I may, in the logarithmic scale. So when you add those two, the higher number does take a precedence over the lower number, and it still stays as 41 when you actually calculate the overall noise levels. Let's say if the dogs were to get close to 41 dBA, which becomes like same as the ambient levels, then you would get a noticeable increase, but it would still be, it wouldn't get even let's say 50% loud. It would get louder by, let's say, 3 dB on the logarithmic scale.
Okay, so it would get louder. If it was similar to the ambient noise, it would get louder by roughly decibels.
Yes.
Okay, and 10 decibels
It's
is
gonna-
twice as loud.
Yep. In terms of if you had to compare a noise level to itself, then that would be like twice as loud. It's almost like, turning the knob to 10 when you're doing like any.
But 3
audio.
decibels is noticeable.
Pardon me?
3 decibels is a noticeable change.
No, in terms of when you have the ambient and when you assess the dogs, the 3 dB won't be noticeable.
That's professional opinion of Cerami, I
Yes.
think. Okay. Thank you.
I just have one other question, if you don't guys, the walls, you said, the acoustic walls, the metal with the fiberglass in between, 8 feet?
Yes.
Why not 10 feet? Why not 60 feet? Why not 120 feet? How'd you get to 8?
Yes. So it depends on the distance between, let's say, the barrier, the source, and then the receiver. So our source is close enough to the barrier because we are putting it right at the fence where the dogs are. So our dogs are pretty close to the fence, which is why we could keep it at that height. Let's say if the dogs were 15, 20 feet away, that's when the height changes, and then we have to raise the barrier to, let's say, get the additional distance, because the sound will travel up and then down to get the additional distance to get that attenuation. Just to also make one more point in terms of audibility versus ambient noise levels that we are talking about, just to put a number to it, when we talk about our projections here, in terms of the noise levels that we were talking about, the outdoor average and the outdoor maximum, in terms of sound and inaudibility, you can only get inaudibility when your sound is 10 dB below what your background noise is. So let's say in here, if the background noise is 30 dB and I am 20 dB, something from the outside is at 20 dB, that's when you get inaudibility. So we are saying that the noise levels are not going to exceed ambient noise levels, but we are not putting a stamp on they are going to be inaudible. The only measurement where we kind of come close to the ambient levels is the outdoor maximum that we ever would get, probably like once or twice in a day, where it gets close to the ambient, which is when it would become apparent, but it will still be close to the ambient noise levels and not exceed it.
I have a comment if it's okay. Typically, when we approve plans like this, the improvements that you have outlined that are going to be built to attenuate the sound are what we end up approving. I think that in this case, supposing, it's based upon your projections. Supposing after you build the structure and the dogs are in there, you go out and you measure the sound, and it exceeds what you projected, okay? What remedies might exist to deal with that situation? Could you change the walls or add some things outside? I know you can't change the structure inside the building, but are there things you can do outside to alleviate that problem?
I'm sure we'll be able to increase the height of the wall if needed.
Okay, so what I'm getting at is, rather than just approving the plan with the structures to attenuate, I think we should incorporate in this approval the standard that the noise, wherever we want it, at that border is not going to exceed the ambient sound as a standard that you need to match. And if it doesn't, then we're going to go back and do something.
Remedy it.
That's what we do with lighting. We put specific lighting standards in, and you have to meet them.
Very smart.
So I think we should do that.
You just call him smart.
Yes, very smart.
Oh, no.
Write that down.
It's a great idea.
It is a great idea.
Okay.
I have a question. I'd like to go back to your earlier comment about comparing sound transmission to eyesight, which I thought was very helpful. And what I don't understand, I understand what you went through, but what I'm coming back to in my mind is that the grade change between the property line and even the top of that 8-foot fence, if you stood at the property line, you would not be able to see the top of the fence, let alone the top of the building, most likely. There's a 24-foot difference between the property line and the top of the building. So I'm wondering, if you can't see the top of the building, how sound is going to be transmitted from the height of a dog to 24 feet up to the property line. It would seem to me that the grading change is going to diminish that sound, one, by distance, and two, by the fact that there is a substantial grade change. You can't see it, so how could the sound travel there?
Yeah. So, interesting. Yes, you asked an interesting question, and we're getting into the acoustics 101 here. But how does sound actually travel, right? So when a dog barks, for example, there's going to be sound going from its mouth to in all different directions, including the elevation, right? There's going to be some sound that's going to travel along the ground, which let's assume that's your direct line of sight if you were to stand at the property line. And if you were able to look at the dog's eye to eye, even with the elevation change, you're going to receive some of that ground, the sound that reaches directly. Then there's that sound that goes up into the air, and then based on also atmospheric acoustics, it may reach you, it may not, because it also depends a little bit on the temperatures that you have. Is it summer? Is it winter? Sound does have a bending effect, whether it's cold up above in the air or hot. But still, in terms of the frequency at which the dogs, or which we have observed the dogs to be barking, the sound that goes up and comes back down wouldn't be much of a problem in terms of our noise projections. But the direct line of sight, even if we don't have direct line of sight, is still our worst case assumption as to if you were to ever have direct line of sight to dogs. And direct line of sight, we use this as acousticians, we do use this term, but direct line of sight is when you're actually standing, even if the source is like 100 feet away, and you can look at a generator and be like, that's a generator that's running. I can even hear it, even if even if the sound was super low, if you see it, you're gonna hear it. So that usually is our worst case assumption when we do noise projections. So to even eliminate that, if ever in the future we got to that point where we ever had a direct line of sight to the dogs, we just wanted to eliminate that possibility once and for all.
So that's essentially your safety factor?
Yes.
Because it cannot be calculated in a reasonable way, I would assume? So you're saying the benefit of that grade change is just not in the calculation at this point?
No,
Okay, so there is a benefit, but we can't define
it's hard to calculate, yes.
Okay,
But
You know-
you're not saying that the source of the proposed source of the noise, where they are, with all your mitigative designs, and the grade change, you're not saying that you will not hear the barking dogs?
Yeah,
When they're
I'm-
outside?
Yep, I'm not saying they're going to be inaudible.
Okay.
They're not going to exceed ambient noise levels.
They're gonna add to the ambient.
A little bit, they might not, they will not exceed though.
so you're
So-
being careful is what you're doing. I'm not trying to be cute, but I'm saying you've given yourself a safety factor by not attributing any benefit to that grade change.
Yes.
So that is a,
Because it also depends on what that grading is all made of. You know, there's a lot of different things that you
Absolutely,
can get into the weeds if you had to do such an extensive study. It depends on what shrubs you have, you know, what kind of soil you have. Is it loose? Is
and
it
you're
tight?
also not saying it couldn't be inaudible. It could be. You're just saying, you're not telling us it will be, because I would think that's a foolish position to take,
No, he's
given,
just saying it's not gonna exceed ambient.
that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
But you put the landscape buffer that you're putting up there on top of that with the grade change and the other.
It adds to the absorption. It adds to, you know, how much the sound is being absorbed. The other thing that I want to quickly point out, the difference between the current facility and the new facility is the current facility, and I'm going to guess here because I saw the dogs coming out but didn't count every one of them. But I think the current pods have 30 dogs that are let out in let's say, a yard. The new facility that we are building are only going to have about 10 dogs that come out. So the number of the dogs that each yard has is also going to go down.
And so, just back to the construction of the building and the construction of the walls. The walls of the building will have some sound attenuation properties for sound transmission, not necessarily absorption from the inside, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And we will get that, I suggest that we get that design and whatever rating that has, whether it's STC or whatever the
Yes,
standard is
that's
today. So we know what we're getting. The second is, as far as the exterior sound absorption walls, is there a selection out of this menu here?
It's
Yet?
I think the final decision is still to be made. We have proposed this as one of the solution. It has to be the cost and, you know, the way you build it does have to be weighed in at this point. But there's a couple different options that you can. There's a catalog that you can choose from, how you want it to look, what color you want, and what company you want to go for. Who is going to sell it to you for the cheapest? You know, that all still needs to be considered.
Well, the existing, I mean, I've told this story before, the existing facility had some sound issues prior to its redo, in which they did some details of the new walls and the existing kennel to prevent sound transmission, so you don't hear it outside. It apparently is still full of echoes and probably not a good situation on the inside. Is that fair to say?
Inside, I think it's the same, but I think outside I'm not sure if they added anything. I'm not
Well,
sure.
the walls, as I recall, the walls were required to have a very
Right.
high sound transmission rating to prevent you hearing the dogs all
The
the
sound,
time.
yes.
Right, so I think that was done.
Yep.
So I would look for, those types of standards to make sure that as much is being done in terms of the noise transmission for the neighbors, that's all.
I would agree.
That's about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Interesting product.
Thank you.
So in addition to this information that was submitted, you also received a updated tree mitigation report. Tony Russo could not be here tonight to dive into that and answer any questions. I did get the tree commission memo. I don't know what to say. I mean, this is like 3 or 4 times back and forth with them. And at some point, we would like someone, I know your tree your environmental consultant is looking at it, so I think we should just wait to see what they have to say about what we submitted at this point.
Okay.
But we did in the report provide the information, we offers of mitigation. I think the board has to make a decision what they would like to see in, in
You-
regards to mitigation.
Do you have someone attending the October 18th meeting?
The,
Tree
The
board
tree-
meeting?
if I can get someone there, I will have someone there, if that's what it takes.
Well, are you disagreeing with their
I just,
numbers or?
John, they're confusing the hell out of me.
Okay.
Every time you get a memo from them, it's like,
Mhm.
they're like all over the map, to be honest with you, and I just, you know,
Do you think the variation in the numbers, if there is, because I looked at it, but I didn't
yeah.
compare it back to what you, is that, so far from one another that it's a problem, or is it close?
no, I think there's still, there still seems to be, no alignment in thinking
Okay.
on what we're doing. And, I stand by what Tony Russo provided and his numbers and his means to calculate what we need to do for mitigation. And, right now, that's what we have, but again, I don't feel like there's any alignment in where we're thinking, or the direction we're thinking versus what the tree commission is thinking.
So if you can get someone there, I think it would be helpful.
I'm gonna try.
Okay.
I didn't even realize, I missed that in the memo that they had a meeting coming up.
Would it be reasonable to say, Joe, that with this disagreement or different positions, that you come back to this board for final resolution of that disagreement or misunderstanding, or however you want?
We would sure hope so.
Okay.
But at some point, but at that point, the board still has to decide on whether the mitigation we're offering is acceptable.
Mhm.
All right, so we'll wait to hear what our consultant. or the town
Let's see what comes out of that meeting that they're having,
And the consult,
Yeah,
yeah,
right?
sure.
Okay.
okay,
All right,
thank
so,
you.
we'll be back, I guess, at the next meeting with that, and, hopefully we can close the door on this one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
Coming up with a strain of laryngitis for dogs.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have Toll Brothers at Catherine Street.
Before that, do you want to call Kane again, before you get them up?
Yeah.
Which one was that?
That was.
There was two of them
Dahmer,
that didn't
Kane.
show up. The first one was Nantucket Sounds Sons.
I don't see
Anybody
it
show
right
up from them? No? All right, so
Dahmer.
we'll table that.
Yep.
And then we had Stammer Subdivision, Kane Residence.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah, come on up, please. This should be quick.
Is this the Tesla house or not the Tesla house?
SY1. Oh, you guys have SY1? Good evening, my name is Peter Scott. I'm an architect and engineer representing the 535 Jerome Road. Back in 2001, in 2019, the Stammer subdivision was approved. It was 3 lots plus an existing home. At that time, we then pursued an approval for another applicant for doing a house development site, which is pretty much SP1 in front of you. You have SY1 at all? And at that time, we received all your approvals, including New York City DEP, Westchester County Department of Health, and town approvals, including the tree preservation and ABACA. So we were started construction at that point in time. We filed our NOI. My applicant, my client at the time, had us initiate site work and some erosion control devices. And then other issues took place with his company, and he was transferred to Florida. We ended up building a house that he designed in Florida, but now we have a new applicant before you. Michael Kane has purchased the 2 lots. In front of you is 2, and below it to the west is number 3. The property has a slight flag, and it extends off of Jerome to the south. So on the left-hand side of that SY1, there appears to be Jerome Road. So we go through this opening, and the property pretty much is sloped relatively steeply to the west, which is the bottom of the page. And so the design, which is pretty much incorporates a lot of DEP requirements, is we have a single-access driveway exactly where the previous applicant placed it. And the property then, the roadway or driveway extends to the center of the property itself. What took place with Mr. Kane is he decided to make the footprint of the house smaller. So our footprint went from about 5,600 square feet to about 3,800 square feet. And a lot of this I gave you in a letter dated September 27th, which talked about a summary of what's taking place here. So with the relocation of the house, making it smaller, we have a future barn proposed, which is to the southwest of the main house. We also have a future pool. But what's important to realize is that we're working within a larger footprint, which has now been reduced. I do have a comparative map, which I'll provide at the next meeting, which is a color map defining previously approved and what we have now. But you can see the area disturbance is somewhat similar because of two items. The DEP required to have a very extensive infiltration basin system at the lower southwestern corner of the property. Also, because of the soils, we had a very large septic system approved at the northwest section of the property, and those pretty much dominate the disturbances. The trees were cleared with our previous applicant, and we did have a tree preservation plan approved and prepared, and our mitigation pretty much is maintained identical to the previous application. The intent was to basically buffer the development from the existing houses along Jerome, which are to the north on our left-hand side of that map. And so we had a large array of giant arborvitaes creating a crescent shape as depicted on that site plan. Along the northern property line, we had black American arborvitaes proposed to create almost like a buffer. It's one form of a buffer plantings. They're right on the property line to the north of our proposed site. To the east, where we have lot number 1 developed, and the existing lot there, which is a tennis court depicted, we have a very tight buffer planting of skip laurels on that hillside, and our intent is to create very dense foliage evergreen buffers along the property line, especially to the east or the top of the map. That's because our property drops about 25 feet down from the neighboring property to where our house is located, and so our house is pretty much below the buffers that we're creating on the eastern side of the property. So our roof will be below the skip laurel buffers that we have. And that's why we put all our plantings right on the property line itself. But inside the property, we also have a couple things going on. Our neighbors planted earlier bamboo on the property, and we have a pretty extensive mitigation plan required by the company called Save a Tree to sort of prevent that spreading on our property. In lieu of this, of about, well, it's now about 2,500 square feet of bamboo. We are removing all that. We're putting in plastic barriers 4 feet in the ground. We're removing all that contaminated soil off-site. It's a requirement of the plan. And we're putting in a mixed variety of basically decorative plants in that one area. That's right at the start of that crescent shape of the giant arborvitaes on the map before you. In addition, we're putting in some crosshatched areas on that map extensive plantings around the house. The house faces toward Jerome. When you drive down the driveway, the house will be presented in front of you, and we have, again, typical residential plantings are proposed in front of the house itself. So that's pretty much what we've proposed. To the south, we are 303 feet away from the property line, so we're not really proposing any plantings in that area because the properties to the south are undeveloped and very steep, and we don't anticipate any impacts to any neighbors on the south. And my client, again, owns lot number 3 to the west, and basically that's currently remaining vacant or untouched. But if that project does move forward before you, we'll incorporate another planting plan in that as well to enhance any buffering requirements to the west. So again, the septics are still remaining, and the septics are current with the health department. The DEP is current with this plan. Again, it's just a new residential footprint on the property. That's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions, concerns?
No. Looks good.
Could you just talk a little bit more about the tree mitigation in terms of what was, you already cleared the site from the original owner?
Yes.
You know, what rough number of trees and what number of trees are going back, that kind of thing?
Sure.
Just summarize.
Well, we have, we removed about 140 trees in the clearing. It was mainly some white pines, but a majority of it was black locust.
Okay.
And it was a pretty dense black locust, but they were all about between 8 and about 12 inches in diameter. But it was very thick. It was really overgrown with vines and weeds, etc. So what we propose is the green arborvitaes, giant green arborvitaes. We propose 8 of those in that crescent shape. The black American arborvitaes, we proposed 28. The skip laurels, we proposed 100 because basically we're utilizing them as a solid buffer on our plan. Widely spaced trees won't do anything for us because the neighbors are looking down at us. We had to make that buffer very dense. And then the planting beds, we have over 400 plants proposed, and we're proposing 2 separate beds. One's about 800 square feet, which is replacing the bamboo, which is about 2,500 square feet. And then the other component is about 1,200 square foot of plants in front of the house, a mixed variety of residential plantings. The remaining portion of the site, you can't have trees where the septic is, and the septic is over almost half an acre. We can't put any trees where all that DEP infiltration basins and treatment devices are. And also, if you look at that site plan, there's a pochade area in the middle. That is a permanent stone outlet trap, sediment trap, which the DEP required as well. So we're so encumbered to the west of our site that we couldn't put anything in there because we're constrained, and that's why we worked on the perimeter.
Mm-hmm. And the mitigation plan is essentially the same as the original approved mitigation plan.
That's
is that
correct. Yes. Right. Except for some minor orientation of where the house is. That's it.
Nice guy.
Okay, so I was going to submit you a plan for the next meeting, which is a color a plan which outlines the limited disturbance lines for both the previously approved project and what this project is, identifying all these big areas of disturbance, septic system, infiltrators, stone outlet, sediment traps, to show you why we're sort of limited to what we had last time. And that's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was a Staten Highway.
Was that?
Nantucket here now.
Number 6.
Yes.
Nantucket.
Oh, Nantucket showed up?
I believe that's Nantucket.
Oh, you here? Come on up. This is Nantucket Sound Sons. This is discussion of proposed field changes.
Good evening. Sorry, we had a conflict earlier this evening with another planning board, so try to get here as early as we could. Joseph Thompson, architect, represented the project. It's originally approved back in Joseph Thompson, architect, representing the Nantucket Sounds project. The project was originally approved back in 2021. Ownership transferred last year, and construction has started. So if you were to visit the site today, it's framed, sheathed, and proceeding forward with windows and siding to follow. And so the change that was requested was just the material, the siding. We met with the Acaba board last week and reviewed a proposed change, not to the detailing or the architecture, the color, all the trims, the brick, that would all stay the same, but just to the siding itself was a proposed change from what was a hardy material to a comparable color vinyl. And so the board reviewed, I think issued a statement that didn't express any concerns with the substitution, but we were advised that we needed to be here before the board this evening, just last week, and so happy to discuss any questions or issues the board may have with the proposed change.
Is that representative of the panel? It's 4.
It is. This is actually 2 that interlock.
Okay.
So it's a Dutch lap. It's got a more defined profile than what you typically expect out of vinyl. So I think it's a much more attractive product than the basic vinyl. It's a CertainTeed product.
So each piece of material is 2.
Is 2, correct? Yep. So like these will
Okay.
interlock at that point. Yep.
Okay.
And this is in place of hardy plank?
This is proposed in place of the hardy plank, the fiber cement panels.
What's the length of the
The
pieces?
length is comparable. I would expect vinyl siding product, I believe, is typically 18 feet or so, and I think hardy's about the same for purposes of seams. Most of the pieces will be broken up in smaller planes in between the windows. You can see there's a regular fenestration both on the front or the side. I think the only place that we'd have to plan for the seams are on the intermediate areas between the 2 floor levels. And one idea that was suggested at the Acaba board was to actually try to plan to hide those seams behind the gutter leaders, if we're able to do so. We'll have a dark bronze half-round aluminum gutter with leaders that would be at the front and back of the 2 sides. So not every seam would be able to be hidden, but we could make an effort to do that.
Color any different besides the material?
Color's very comparable.
Okay.
Within a shade. We had brought samples to the prior board meeting. They seemed satisfied.
No problem.
And this color has some similarity to the Optum building, the Caramount building?
Similarity, yes, but
In
there's
terms
some
of color?
contrast too. So when we originally designed this building, we tried to make the architecture complementary in the sense that we have strong 12-on-12 roof pitches, shed dormers, but we also took a little liberty in the detailing, so it didn't feel like it was just a replica of that building. So even on the shed dormers, we actually banked a series of windows together where their sheds have them spaced apart. So the projecting gables are slightly different. We tried to get a little bit of diversity in the detailing so the buildings didn't feel like a copy of each other.
What's the material in the gable end?
That's a shake style, so that would be similar vinyl product, originally proposed as fiber cement, but we can provide that scallop detail in
But
the
it's in
upper
a different
gable.
color?
It's in a different color,
Okay,
yes.
but it's a scallop vinyl shingle replica?
At the very top, and then down below that projecting form is clapboard again, in the contrasting color, the beige,
But it's vinyl clapboard as opposed to
fiber cement.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Problem with this?
Anything, John?
The to-weather dimension of this is about what, 5 inches?
You're asking about the
Yeah,
4 inches.
4 inches? Is that similar to the Caramount building?
Similar. Parties typically, that can range between 4 to 6 inches. I don't know what the Caramount is. I think that the most common's 5.
I think it's 6. Is it
Caramount larger at 6?
Is it 6, Robin? I think it's 6. Is there a product that comes in to weather at 6 inches in the vinyl?
There is not,
There is
that I'm aware of.
What is the trim on the windows?
The trim on the windows, they are 1x4 casings. So we would propose, instead of fiber cement, to use PVC, but to maintain those casings, to have those same profiles.
So it's not gonna be vinyl?
No. So it would have a true casing, it would have a true sill, a drip cap, all of those elements. And so when I look at the building overall, at least to me, my mind, the most important features of the architecture, the form, the fenestration, the detailing of those windows, the trims, none of those things will be compromised. This is just the material itself. And from a historic standpoint, most true clapboards are probably closer to the 4-inch dimension. You do sometimes have larger dimensions, but I think it's more common to see tighter profiles. And I think with the scale of our building, it feels more appropriate than the 6-inch.
Okay.
The view that's depicted here is what you'd see from the main road passing by. That's the residential entry side. It reads as a 2-story.
So what's the width of the bay there?
The bays, let's see if I have a dimension on the plan. 20 feet.
20 feet. So you're gonna have one seam at each run?
I'd expect that we would just at the intermediate areas between the top of the first floor windows and the bottom of the second floor windows. And with Hardy, I believe we'd have that as well. I don't believe Hardy comes in any longer lengths.
But these are a lapped seam, is it not?
It is.
Yeah, Hardy's not.
Hardy's a butt. Yeah,
Right.
correct.
What do we need to do for this change?
If you're accepting the change, you just need to accept it, and it will go out in memo form, because it's not, a significant change.
Can I ask a question? So this project is underway. There was some other regulatory things that I think, agreements that had to be met. Do we know if they're all in?
Well, there's a environmental systems planner that needs to, you have that in?
We were notified last week, and since that time, we've just earlier today reached out to Engineer of Record to try to identify which company performed those services on the Caremount building. That may make sense to work with the same company if they're already familiar with that site, since it's an extension of it. If not, we'll hire another firm, but we're going to make efforts to ensure that we bring that into compliance.
By hopefully next week, I suspect. Okay.
That's what we'd hope as well.
The other thing to speak about is the mitigation, which some of it takes place on the trail.
Right.
And there is, as I understand it, particular times of year that it is most advantageous to do the removals and the plantings. I don't know which is the most important, probably the removals, so need to get that on the radar, because the mitigation needs to be done in order for the project to be complete. And it seems as though you will be coming out the end of winter ready to, get tenants in there, I would think, somewhere around that time. No?
I would imagine at the pace this is proceeding, it could be ready, say, end of first quarter, early second quarter next year.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with the mitigation scope myself, but we'll reach out to site consultants and make sure that that's coordinated with the new owner.
Yeah, so my recommendation is that you go through the resolution, whether it's you or whoever on the team's gonna do it. Look at what the requirements are in the resolution and on the site plans, and just make sure that we're not getting to a point where we're coming to the end and we haven't done something because we didn't take the time to look.
Sure, we'd hate to have a CO delayed over an issue that could have been preventable.
Right.
Thank you.
Missing anything? Okay. Anybody? Good?
Why don't we take a little vote on the,
Yes.
Was there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Please follow up with those other issues.
We will.
Appreciate it. All right, next, last but not least, Toll Brothers at Catherine Street. It's a town board referral. How are you?
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is David Cooper, partner with the law firm of Zarin and Steinmetz, here representing the applicant and contract vendee Toll Brothers. This is a proposal to redevelop a portion of the Field Home Holy Comforter property with a 118 unit active adult townhome community, 55 and older. It does require a zoning map amendment by the town board. We are proposing to rezone it to the RSP2 district. Right now it's in a split zone, RSP3 and residential zone. And then we would be coming back to your board for site plan and subdivision approval. With me tonight is Kevney Moses from Toll Brothers, as well as Joe Rena from Site Design Consultants, who you know, and my colleague Jacqueline Cohen. We're here tonight on a project update. It's been a while since we've been before your board, although that doesn't mean we haven't been doing our homework. The town board has referred us over to your board for a referral on SECRA, because they're serving as the lead agency, although they want to hear from you as to whether there are any potential impacts that they should be looking at, or whether you feel that there are no significant adverse impacts, as well as a recommendation on the proposed rezoning. We have been working through many of the issues that your board brought up, the town board brought up, and most importantly, staff has brought up. We've had a couple of meetings with John and Robin to go through potential scoping of potential impacts, and then also reports that are responsive to those concerns. I'll let Kevin take you through all of the impact assessments that we've submitted. One of the things I do want to highlight is we'll probably start there, is that since you've last seen the plan, the layout has changed in response to an identified potential water course or intermittent stream. And so we'll put that up on the screen in a second, but the density remains the same, although there's a lot more open space. It's a little more condensed. So Kevin, you want whatever to do to take a look at it. One thing I'd say is as we're going through the plans and the reports, what we'd like to know from your board at the end of tonight is, are we at a place where your board is comfortable providing a recommendation back to the town board, or is there more information that you believe you would need? We've been obviously doing our homework, but we want to make sure that the process continues to move. So at the end, I'll come back up and pose that question to you, but just keep that in mind as we go through everything we've evaluated.
Good evening, board members. Pleasure to be in front of you this evening. Thank you for your time and your attention to this application. So since it's been some time since we've been in front of you, I just wanted to remind everyone contextually of the site. We're talking about 2300 Catherine Street, just uphill from the intersection of Catherine and Old Crompton. I think colloquially known as the Field Home site. And going back before going forward, I just wanted to make sure everyone had an understanding of where this project started conceptually from a site planning standpoint and where it sits today. So on this slide, what you will see is starting from the left to the right, the 2021, and yeah, it's amazing that it's been 2 years since we first started with engaging with the town on this project. But in 2021, you can see that the road network is far different than it is today. You can see that the project's limit of disturbance was far greater than what we are showing today. It proceeded far closer to the wetland areas, the water courses, and to the eastern portions of the site. In 2022, we actually revised that conceptual site plan, which you will see in the middle image there. It did further condense the development, providing some environmental enhancements. However, during our wetland validation and water course validation process, the town's wetland consultant did actually, in fact, find an additional water course on site. And after working with staff, we once again revised that site plan to the 2023 version that you see on the far right today. And I think that paints a picture of how this development's limit of disturbance has continued to decrease over time. And that's certainly something we think that is valuable in where we stand today. So just a brief synopsis. Again, early 2023, the conceptual site plan was revised to honor this additional water course that was found during the town consultant's review. And as a result of that effort, the new conceptual site plan further condenses that development to avoid adverse environmental impacts. It reduces the limits of disturbance, the extensive tree clearing, and the overall environmental impact. It does maintain a 118 unit density, same as the 2022 plan, and relocates the amenity complex to the bottom of the site. Next slide. And before really getting into the bulk of what we wanted to chat with you about tonight, just a quick reprise of the benefits of this project. This is an entirely age-restricted 55 and older development. Again, it is a townhouse project with clusters of 3 and 4 townhomes. There will be 0 school children associated or stemming from this project. It meets a critical need identified in the town comprehensive plan, notably senior housing and housing variety. Remarkably, it will produce over $1 million of annual net tax surplus. There is anticipated to be a $472,000 recreation fee associated with this development. And I've heard from a couple of different folks in town that other developers have been trying to shirk that responsibility, and I just wanted to make sure that the board knew that Toll Brothers is coming to the table willing and ready to pay full freight. So again, that's $472,000 recreation fee. We're also, in our application, have noted that we are willing to make a voluntary $100,000 contribution towards recreation, which I'd like to touch on a little bit further into our presentation. There is also a robust on-site amenity complex to further reduce demand on town facilities. That includes a pool, a clubhouse, coming with a gym, common spaces, etc., pickleball courts, and the like. This revitalizes what is a wholly fallow, underutilized parcel of land in town while widely now respecting the environmental buffers. Now, I have to be truly thankful to John and Robin in helping us along in this process, but at the request of town staff to broaden the scope of study for this project, the following information has been provided, inclusive of a recreation analysis, a historic analysis, stormwater analysis, environmental analysis, a tree survey, an inflow and infiltration analysis, and an updated EAF. And just to note, one thing we do know that the town staff would like us to provide additional information on is the potential I&I issues on site. Now, we'll touch on that again a little further into the presentation, but I&I stands for inflow and infiltration. It's related to issues on sewer capacity in town. As far as the recreation analysis, there is an existing field present at the field home site at 2300 Catherine. And what town staff had asked us to do is understand the provenance of that field. How did it get there? Why was it put in place? How is it used? What is its condition? And part of that history is that that field actually came from an agreement from the Glastonbury Court project that occurred across the street. That field formerly resided there. As part of that development, a deal was made between the field home, that developer, and the town to relocate that field onto 2300 Catherine Street. That field has a current lease with the town that expires in January of 2026, and we have been told by the field home owners that they will not be seeking renewal on that field. However, further on this study, again, kind of looks at the in situ conditions of the field, its quality, its usage, and helps to identify potential mitigation opportunities for the loss of that field. And this was all done in collaboration with the town Parks and Rec department, specifically Jim Morderano. And I would also just like to mention that we've had ongoing conversations with the town board, most particularly Councilman Esposito, who has taken particular interest in this issue. And, you know, while we already have in our application a $100,000 voluntary contribution based on conversations with Councilman Esposito, we are willing to up that contribution to $150,000, which I feel like is, again, a good faith effort of us going above and beyond for the community. Secondly was the historic analysis. Big elephant in the room on that property is the field home building itself. And you know, we exhaustively tried to understand if this was something we could incorporate into our project, but quite frankly, it did not work for our operations, nor the project layout. So from the onset, this was something we considered an opportunity to donate to the town, or to possibly find a third-party vendor that would obviously work within the goalposts that the town would set for a future adaptive reuse. We do believe that there's great opportunity, being that it's already in the RSP3 district, to have this be some type of continued senior use. And we've been told by a local commercial real estate agent that there is active interest in some type of property along those lines. The historic study itself looked at the historic provenance of this building, its in situ conditions, and what potential adaptive reuse scenarios they saw. That was done by Stephen Tilley Architects out of Dobbs Ferry. And that study is quite lengthy and had some interesting conclusions. Stormwater, our team civil engineer is Joe Rena from Site Design Consultants, and Joe has produced a preliminary SWIP alongside a stormwater plan that indicates realistic solutions for stormwater management practices integrated with a layout and grading plan to ensure practical feasibility, as in, can this project actually get built? And I believe Joe's answer is yes. Environmental analysis. There was also certain anecdotal purported historical dumping activities that we heard about through the grapevine. And interestingly, we actually had a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental investigation completed on this property, of which studied this, again, anecdotally purported area of historical dumping. In order to go even further, we had a phase 2 supplementary memo recently submitted by our environmental consultant, SESI Consulting Engineers. I'll just read a quick snapshot from that supplementary memo. As a result of our review, we have concluded that no justification exists to further investigate the site or seek involvement of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation or any other regulatory agency. SESI has followed the applicable guidance and regulations for all appropriate inquiries and investigations, and we do not have any further concerns with REC 2, or Recognized Environmental Condition, based on our review and investigations. Sure. So, sorry, my attorney, always helping me along. No problem. The material that was present and investigated, again, by SESI was found to be entirely organic. Again, landscape materials. Those materials can be reused on site based upon their investigation and analysis. And again, no action necessary locally or at the state level. There was also a tree survey completed, quite exhaustively, if I might add. All trees over 8 inches in caliper were surveyed throughout the site, rather throughout the site's limit of disturbance, and all trees over 6 inches in caliper within buffer areas. There are approximately 1,500 protected trees to be removed. Just a quick breakdown of some of the constituency there. 46% red maple, 13% sweet birch, 8% beech, 8% tulip tree, and alongside other mitigation measures, extensive proposed trees and native plantings will be employed to meet the mitigation criteria and requirements, whether that is invasive control in other portions of the site or payment into the town's tree fund. The I&I analysis, again, the thrust of that was to determine if there is any improper inflows into the sewer system emanating from either our site or the neighboring site that would be contributing to some of the issues that they're seeing at the Hunter Brook Pump Station. This investigation, if you look at the blue dots Those are the flow monitoring locations. The arrows indicate the sewer flow itself. You'll notice the field home building that is closest to Catherine Street and the adjacent rehabilitation facility, not on our site, next door. The sewer lines from the rehabilitation facility and the field home building meet, and then connect into a central line going down the hill towards Old Crompton. This study, which was in place for a minimum of 3 weeks, I believe, it showed existing minor issues related to I&I, but I would just like to say that those issues that are present once the site was redeveloped with new infrastructure and routing would likely be solved. But again, town staff has indicated that they would like additional studies conducted. We're open to that, but just need some direction on how those should be performed and where. This is really just a reprise of the reprise, if you will, of benefits, but we'll leave this slide up. We'd be happy to answer questions or address any of these studies in particular.
You got a question?
That was pretty thorough.
Has any calculations been done on the increase to the capacity for the pumping station for sewage going to Hunter Brook?
So we certainly have an understanding of what the development would produce, but what is still unknown is what is contributing to the issues that are, apparently, from our understanding, are present at Hunter Brook. And typically, sewer and water calculations are done 110 gallons per bedroom. These are 3-bedroom units. There's 118, so those calculations just are arithmetic.
I'm under the impression that Hunter Brook is almost at capacity, above capacity at this point. This is obviously adding to that. Am I correct, John?
No, I think you're correct. The indication that we've gotten so far from town engineer is that there are capacity problems emerging at Hunter Brook, in particular in rain events.
Right.
And so the I&I is of a particular interest. And I see Dan walking in so he can speak for himself. I think we said a little
Perfect timing,
few
Dan.
code words that made him appear.
Got a little earpiece he wears.
Right,
you know?
his ears are ringing.
So it is an issue and that needs to be worked through.
Yeah,
certainly.
I think, and we've been doing a little bit more digging in the studies that the town has already undertaken throughout the entire system as a result of the DEC order on consent. The issue, I think, is if it's on a sunny day and it's fully developed,
Correct, it's
there's
storm
capacity
events
for it.
and, yes.
Right, now, the problem we have from an analysis point of view is it's not going to be this development that's the problem, right? It's existing I&I and other issues on the line, and we're trying to find that out. But we need, we need Dan to sit down with us to say, here's where I think the issue may be. I mean, based on the limited reports that I've gone through so far from the town, it doesn't actually look like it's coming from this site. It may be somewhere else on the line, but look, we're here. We're saying we're ready to move this forward, and if that is an issue, please come sit down with us. We're saying, Dan, sit down with us. Let us know what we have to look at. We'd like to do that, as soon as possible.
That's kind of why I asked it, because I know it's a problem waiting to be addressed.
Right.
And I was just wondering at what point. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
in the current state of what it is, and Dan can expound on this, is that it does have problems in heavy rain events, so it would be difficult to add this number of units in without having something
An upgrade.
remedial take
Yeah.
place, so that the pump station functions properly when these folks come online, if and when they do. So, is that correct?
All right, watch out.
Yeah, we sit down with
Can you
the applicant.
first say who you are?
I am Dan Ciarci, a town engineer,
Oh, thank you.
emeritus,
That's right.
2.0.
2.0, exactly. So the town, as David mentioned, we have a ongoing order on consent. Part of what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing closed-circuit TV investigations. So that'll be happening, we're going to start in the next few months to identify where the problems are. We're also doing an evaluation of the actual pump station to make sure it's functioning properly, that we're getting the flows we're supposed to get. Because the bottom line is the facility gets stressed when it rains. So in combination of reducing those extraneous flows as well as making sure that the pump station is running at its proper efficiency are the two moving parts here we need to address. Ultimately, sort of where the rubber meets the road on this is obviously through seeker. Even in the absence of seeker, ultimately we have to provide a letter to the health department that we have adequate capacity to accept a development. So I'm pretty sure we can address these problems, and I think what we'll find out as we drill into this with the closed-circuit TV work, I think what we'll find is there are leaks. With one pretty good one we're aware of right now. Unfortunately, it's like 20 feet down, so we're trying to figure out how to get to it. But I'm sure more stuff is going to shake out. The stuff on the west side of Hunter Brook Road is the newer system that was largely built by the field home. On the east side of Hunter Brook Road, you have the old developments dating back to the 60s with transite pipe, which we think is definitely going to be a contributing factor. So what we'll look at is identifying the leaks and working with the applicant. We don't expect it to all fall on them, but to participate in the remediation of fixing the leaks, because that's the only way we're going to get to capacity.
So you transite pipe, that's how deep?
The transite pipe isn't, that's shallow.
Okay.
But the lines going into the pump station, some of those are like 20 feet deep. And we've got a break right at the saddle. So we're working at trying to figure out how to get there. We have one contractor that was mobilized, ready to do it, and then we got some rain and the groundwater just shot up and they couldn't do the work. So, right. So hopefully, we've actually have a purchase order out to do that work. So we're hoping
that the town's paying for that?
Yeah, we're paying for that.
It's our existing infrastructure.
Right.
And how many miles are we talking about of sewer pipe that is going to be investigated?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I want to say it's like 11,000 feet, but I can elaborate on that.
And that section that was chosen to be looked at and be inspected, how was that picked?
Well, similar to what the applicant did, there were flow meters deployed throughout the system, and the flows measured over a period of time, and then you compare the flows you're getting. Well, there's two things we look at. One is, is there a spike when there's rainfall, which is indicative of actual inflow? So we did see a little bit of a blip in the data they collected, but it wasn't the silver bullet sort of pointing to some catch basin or a roof drain system inappropriately connected. The other part of it is to look at the infiltration rate, and then we're comparing to miles of pipe, population. There's a bunch of different things to see if it's in the ballpark, as well as what's the flow when it's dry out. So those things are all indicators of how much extraneous flow is coming in from both the inflow and the infiltration.
So, excuse me, there was an engineering determination made to where to look at this. So regardless of whether this application was here or not, that's something that the town...
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the transite pipe, what would you determine is or estimate the ages on that?
Probably like 60 years.
that's probably at the end of its useful life.
Well, I mean, the pipe structurally holds up. What ends up happening, unfortunately, is roots find their way in, and that ends up bursting the pipe.
So is it possible there could be a relining project for this?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, and that's the kind of stuff, once you run the cameras through, you identify offset joints, you identify roots, and if you got roots, that means you got a big hole that, you know, that the roots created.
So, again, regardless of this application, there's an aging infrastructure that is adding to the pump station's woes.
Yeah,
It's gotta
and,
be
and,
addressed.
and I like to think this will be a collaborative effort. We don't expect the applicant to solve everything, but, you know, at a minimum, there should be, you know, if you're familiar, like you know, it's a different situation, but the county, like when they bring people in, like that's the standard memo, comes from county planning to shake you down for doing inflow and infiltration reduction. You know, even if it had nothing to do with you. So we're trying to, you know, not be as heavy-handed. We want to, like I say, make it collaborative. We've got some responsibilities to repair this situation as well.
So after this testing and this work is done, what kind of time frame you think we're looking at before we get real answers?
Well, I would hope by the spring we'll actually have a list of things to be fixed with an estimated flow of those, you know, those defects, which kind of then gives you a means to prioritize, you know, where to go first and where to, you know, get the most bang for your buck.
Dan, there is another project that is being considered by the board on Garden Lane. That would also impact the same sewer line, correct?
Yes.
Just a question.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I have a different, I don't have a question for Dan, but
Okay.
thank you.
Don't go far, Dan, though.
Dan,
Is it
don't
on
go.
I&I, or can I just, because there are a couple of things I want to just hit there.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll hold.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry. So, a couple of things, because from our perspective, waiting till spring just to identify what the mitigation would be for this project, I don't think is necessary, but also would be very problematic for the project. Obviously, the applicant's not going to, nor would they be responsible for the entire issue, right? The question is, well, how do we calculate the mitigation, right? Sort of the I&I mitigation that's attributable to the project, and then essentially quantify that in monetary terms, right? That's how the county does it. That's how it's typically done. And that's what sort of the law requires, right? There's got to be a nexus between the impact and the mitigation. In this case, I think we've got all the information we need, right? Because if Dan already knows that, look, well, we're going to need to line X, you know, a certain amount of pipe. There's some problem along the line that's very deep down. We kind of get a sense of how much that's going to cost. You can take the added, you know, capacity that we'd be adding to the line, and based on the overall capacity of the site, or the overall usage of the site, calculate what an appropriate mitigation would be, put a number to it, and essentially say, look, that's the impact. Because from a timing perspective, it sounds like the town's going to know far in advance what needs to be done, and probably can put that project in place before this project's going to come online, right? Because remember, we're at the rezoning part of the process. We still have to go through site plan approval before your board and et cetera. So what we don't want to do is kind of stand here and wait until spring for there to be a recommendation. We'd like to at least kind of knock that piece out to say, look, here's a reasonable monetary amount for that mitigation. Put that in as a recommendation to the town board on the secret determination, and move forward, and then obviously come back to you for site plan, et cetera. Hopefully by that point, Dan has kind of advanced the study and maybe even started the remediation. But that was what we would be proposing on.
So just to pick up on what you're saying, I know you're before the town board for a rezoning. So tell me a little bit about that. What is the as-of-right situation? If you didn't get rezoned, what can be done on this property? And what, do you gain density? Do you gain age restriction by the rezoning? Do you gain both? Because I see it's an R3, R40 combination. I don't know how much of the property is what, and,
So, yeah, so the RSP3, so right now, this wouldn't be permitted under the zoning. The townhome itself, the use wouldn't be permitted. The RSP3 zoning permits multi-level nursing homes and AL and hospices, so sort of a more intense use. We actually submit that this type of use for this property would be less intense than what's permitted under the zoning. Even with the split zoning, that RSP3 would allow uses that have more traffic, more over, more density and more demand. And a nursing home or hospice is a different type of use certainly than a 55 and older.
so you're going from more dense to less dense under this?
I would say more intense use than less dense, right? Because you're comparing apples to oranges, right? You're comparing residential density to hospice or
Okay.
AL or nursing home.
Go
I have a
ahead.
question on recreation. You're showing that there's a recreation fee with an additional $150,000 contribution. Your presentation assumes that it's gonna be a fee in lieu of the land, which I don't understand because that determination gets made by the town, not by the applicant. So I'm wondering how you came to that conclusion.
So, great question. It was a couple things. First of all, based on the condition and the use of the field. The field is in, I think, as Jim would put it, practice quality. So it's not a gameplay field. And interestingly, I believe the town comprehensive plan had noted that what is needed in town is in fact gameplay fields, not practice fields. But we tried to pinpoint a like-for-like mitigation strategy. So again, this was a field of practice quality with a lease that would not seek renewal in less than 2.5 years. So what did we intend on trying to do? We, again, intended to try to come to a like-for-like mitigation, and when you take $472,000 plus what is now $150 plus what is over $1 million of annual net tax surplus, we thought that it would provide ample opportunity to mitigate elsewhere on site. And interestingly, the comp plan also notes that Yorktown has an abundant supply of parkland exceeding national standards for park acreage. National Parks and Recreation Association provides typically 6.25 to 10.5 acres of parks per 1,000 residents. Yorktown has 12.75, so well exceeds that. And that the comp plan also concludes that the town's priority in the future should be to make strategic improvements to serve target demographics and to enhance and maintain existing lands and facilities, not acquiring more. So, the mitigation effort that was pinpointed in the study, based on collaborations with Jim Morderano, was the Hunterbrook facility, which is great because it gets to service the same community members, being that it's just down the street. Hunterbrook has an upper field, which also is somewhat fallow, but with some improvements, which we felt as though this, again, $150,000 plus 472 plus $1 million of annual net is going to get you there to help improve that facility and mitigate whatever is lost by Catherine, even though the lease is expiring in 2026.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, I'm not looking to argue the details or the math, but what I am looking to argue is that you've reached a conclusion that it's not yours to reach. It's for this board, when we do site plan approval, to make a determination whether it's land in lieu of fees or fees in lieu of land.
Could not agree with you more.
Okay, I just want to be clear that you shouldn't assume and I heard you say earlier, or your attorney say earlier, that other developers haven't met their obligation, and that's I think, an incorrect statement to make.
Not met, but have tried to shirk their way out of the full responsibility.
Well, they don't get to decide.
I'm going.
This board
Of
decides.
course.
Okay. Two different issues. I think what Kevin was referring to is the the rec fee associated with the per unit amount, not the soccer field itself, right? With the soccer field, yes, obviously it's the town's decision whether or not a field would stay here or a fee in lieu is a more appropriate use.
Or something else.
Right, but the I think there are two things that I think would address your question. First off, putting a field here, because remember, right now it's a rental field, right? It's not guaranteed forever for town use, right? The upgrades to the upper field at Hunter Brook, I believe that's a town-owned park, right? That's in your ownership. You're going to have that forever, so that field would be able to be used forever without a lease. So what I would submit is that when you get to that determination, that is a better mitigation approach than trying to have a field on a private
No, I
property.
hear what you're saying. I'm not arguing the pluses or minuses of that. I just want you to be clear that this board is not saying to you, yes, we're accepting a fee in lieu of land at this point because we're not doing a site plan review. We're giving a recommendation to the town board for rezoning. I don't want you to walk away from us assuming that you've got our blessing on doing that.
Right, though I think
You
also-
weren't neutral in your presentation is what I'm saying. So it wasn't either or, it was you're giving us a number.
True.
So-
Only because we've also had conversations with the town board and with staff on it. And so we've advanced that discussion over the last year or so when we haven't been before your board. So I apologize for presenting it that way. But our understanding is that, at least for the people that we've been speaking with, is that the recognition that rather than trying to lease the field or continue to lease the field, a contribution towards upgrades to a permanent field is far better from a mitigation perspective.
Mhm.
So.
Okay.
Question? Hey, Dan? Again, back to the sewer. I didn't mean to. Can we get mapping so we can see exactly what we're talking about in reference to?
They had it in their report.
Yeah, but.
No, this is your report.
Oh,
Actually.
that's ours, okay. But yeah, no, we can give it to you a number of ways. We could also even, I think we actually have a link now that we can share with board members.
A what?
A link to our town GIS cloud.
That'll be good.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
So if, I'll have to check with my GIS person, but I think we can do that without you guys having to have additional licenses. So you can just buzz around all through this. Because the other thing we have, is even though they, it's weird, because in that report, we're going beyond the basin, they said, because the Basin 11, which is what's cited in the order on consent, is what I was talking about, mostly on the west side of Hunter Brook Road, which is the new stuff. So, we were going through, because, what they did is the consultant, we kind of took, we didn't agree completely with the consultant's approach, because he used more of a, an infiltration rate typical based upon how much pipe there is. But we went back in and drilled in on population to get to what the actual flow should be. So we started doing, population, and we're gonna have to get some of the, the things like the field home, the commercial meters, to see how much water they use, to do a reality check. But, as the study that Toll Brothers did, because we had identified this as a high flow area, we were expecting to find something. And their study doesn't show that there was a big increase during rain events. So, well, we got to drill into this further.
What do you think?
About that particular issue? I think it's something that should be tracked down with Dan's advice and leadership, of course. You don't want to have developments coming in and you're having trouble, so we have to figure it out and fix it.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately what we're up against is, you know, you know, as much as the applicant would like to just throw some money at it and call it a day, I think maybe a better way to do it is, at least as we, you know, we'll be finding out more information, but through the seeker process, at least coming to sort of the four corners of a deal where, say, for example, if this is their projected flow, we want you to eliminate 1.5 times your projected flow. And here's a number of places where it can be done. We could assign a number to it, and we could integrate it into our program. But as of right now, we don't know the cost associated with knocking the flow down enough to displace the capacity that they're looking for. And I forgot to mention, Bob, on the other development you brought up, they're not in the district, so there's a whole other subplot to this that they're going to be doing district buy-ins. They're not in the county district, so there's a lot of other stuff that's going to have to go on before they actually.
Yeah, but the bottom line of it is that their material or the product is still going to the same.
Yeah,
market
no,
system.
absolutely.
Yes.
But to that end, as this advances, because I don't even think they've gone to the county yet. So a county sewer district change usually takes at least a year. So in the course of that year, we'll know a lot more about what we're doing here, and we could apply the same things to them to allow them into the district.
All right, so adding a little bit of another piece to the puzzle, how is the staging sections going up Stony Street, bringing it to the main line on Route 6? Is that what the problem is at Hunter Brook, that we can't discharge?
Well, that's part of the analysis we're doing to see, yeah, I mean, it's a big force main.
I didn't want to get.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I say, you know, clearly there's an inflow and infiltration problem that needs to be addressed. But also, we want to look at the future for not just this development, there'll be
Yes.
other things coming along. Where are we in terms of our existing facility? Can we update pumps, the hydraulic capacity of the existing conduits? There's a lot of, you know, moving parts to that. But,
Okay.
you know, we did a study, you know, like 25 years ago, and a lot of things happened that we didn't know was going to happen. So, you know, that's kind of how these things go. So we need to now address the new reality and, you know, sort of do our own little, you know, sewer, you know, study to figure out how to get us through the next couple of decades here.
All right, I didn't want to dominate this, I just wanted to ask a question. Thank you.
Only thing I can emphasize is we can't wait until the spring. In other words, all of the monetary amounts you see on there may not be available if we're still here in spring of 2024 waiting for those results. I agree with Dan that, look, if you know that there's a 2-to-1 mitigation, right? You can already identify the amount of flow that's going to be contributed to the system through this development. You can already identify that. So if you want to do a 2-to-1 mitigation, you can also identify what that cost would be, and you'd be able to say, look, we know what the mitigation will be for this development, because the I&I report already shows that there's nothing you can do on the site, right? Because the site itself is not contributing to the issue, but you, like you typically do, you ask for some sort of mitigation fee, like a buy-in fee, and you can calculate that here.
Yeah, but it's not a dollar and cents thing, because even if we get the dollars from you to mitigate what you're putting into the system, so to speak, if we allow this to go through and we are not able to keep up with our end of that problem because of monetary issues that we have, as a planning board, have no control over, we've already okayed a project, taken money to do work on a system that is flawed, that would not be able to and possibly fail when this is up and running.
But then the town's going to face a much larger problem, right? Because
Yes.
under that,
Yes.
then no development can occur, and you're in sort of more financial straits there,
Yes.
right? And so it certainly it only inures to the town's benefit to get the study done quickly, right? But again, the quicker the town moves on the study and the implementation, will probably still be completed before
Don't
this is
get me
done.
wrong, it's not the study.
No,
I'm a
and even- and
study
even-
becomes a project. Project needs money to be funded. If the town isn't in the position to fund all that repair or all the work that's necessary to actually take on a project like this, because it's not only the field homes issue, it's Mark Road, it's all the systems that are surrounding this pumping station. Everything is heading to this pumping station. And if the problem isn't coming from the west side, which we believe is your part of the project, then there's a whole lot of houses on the east side of that pumping station.
It's, you look, and we're in an odd position because
Yeah,
you're right.
I
We're-
understand that
But
exactly.
the practical issue that I'm identifying is in order for the town to get, to have more tax base, to have more money, more I&I fees, et cetera, you need to continue to have development. And I'm not saying, develop everywhere, but what I'm saying is you've got, for example, a project that would help that issue, right?
No doubt about the project.
But we
I
can't
agree
get
with the
there
project.
if it's sort of.
We need answers,
Yeah.
some kind of direction on our end, because you got one point repair, and that turns to you're chasing your tail down the road, which happens all the time. You're not gonna just be able to fix that point and then reline it. You could end up with a much bigger project. And I don't know what is in the funding on the town's end to be able to do that, but I think that's something we really need to get a handle on.
If that's the case, Dan, you got to sit down with us and you got to let us know.
That's
mean,
what I
right,
would
we
strongly
yeah.
suggest is
Like
is the
ASAP,
two
'cause we-
parties
yeah,
meet.
we need to know.
And to really come up with an idea of what we're talking about, because this can get very expensive, very fast.
Pull up a chair.
Is this a rezoning or a site plan
Point
issue?
I have to make, and that's no matter what we discuss here,
Yeah, you lead them down.
Absolutely.
a letter has to be provided to the Westchester County Department of Health when they're looking for approval of their project that says we have adequate capacity and we're willing to serve them. And if the problem isn't solved,
We don't.
we don't.
And that comes
And-
from,
and
that
that-
letter come from him.
So,
Right, no.
right, so I mean, so, like I say, we're gonna work together, but right now, we don't have all the answers. And we're gonna be working on them, and that's why I say, I don't wanna, delay the project. But, whether seeker can be dealt with as, at a level of a more philosophical, ratio of removal, but we can't say how they're gonna get there without knowing where the problems are.
And I think here, we know there's an issue, right? I think everybody's come to that. But we also need to talk to, I think, council, because this is a referral from the town board on rezoning.
It's not even a referral yet, actually, but
All right, but so it's,
informational.
right. So I think we need to get an idea of if we get at a point with this, how much, how does that impact,
Well, I would like to say that, and this speaks to a little bit about the request for recommendations, and this overall, the, process in which we are in is that it is obviously rezoning in front of the town board, and I think that your recommendations, whether large or small, should follow the cadence of the town board review. So in other words, what's before you in the near term is probably determining significance of the secret process and et cetera, et cetera. This issue is certainly a big issue, and the project, rises and falls whether or not this issue gets solved properly in an appropriate time, regardless of what their mitigation requirements will be pursuant to it. But it certainly has to be looked at in order to move the project forward. So I'm not sure what the applicant's timeline is, but I think that we will probably be here in spring of 2024. I don't know that we'll be waiting and figuring out what the I&I results are, but we'll certainly be going along with the town board's review process to do the rezoning. And I think your duty right now is to, advise them as to what things they need to look at, what's important, and what steps that you see are. A couple things that I wanted to bring up, and I think Bob brought up one very important one that I was going to bring up, but I want to touch on it again, is the recreation component, which is solidly in your arena when you get the site plan. And so I think knowing and uncovering all of the information that they have so far is great, but I don't think that there, as Bob said, any acceptance is able to happen of what those mitigations are, what the fee is, et cetera, et cetera. That really is going to come at a time when it's before you for site planning. You have to go through your process that the state requires you to go through to make those determinations. It doesn't happen anywhere else until it gets here. So that's kind of a thing that we've experienced recently that can be complicated between the town board and the planning board, and I don't mean in an oppositional way, but just in a coordination way. So that's something to consider. And I think some of the things that were talked about will probably need to be talked about again and in greater detail to come to a conclusion, but I don't think that needs to happen tonight or even in the next month. What has to happen tonight and in the next month in that regard in recreation is whether or not it appears that the applicant has provided enough information to allow the town board to make an informed decision about the rezoning. Right? So the details can come later, but I think we have to keep reminding ourselves of exactly where we are in the process and what information is needed to do the things at hand.
John, the only thing, I believe the town board is serving as lead agency in this
They
review?
are.
Okay, all right, so.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Which, makes it a little more complicated in certain regards. It makes it simpler along the whole timeline of it, because when it gets to the planning board, they have less to do. But sometimes the separation, it can get a little muddy with what's accepted in, those deliberations and what these folks actually have to do after the fact is what I'm getting at.
Okay, some of the determinations that you're referring to actually I think are going to happen at the town board level by virtue of them being the lead agency. But regardless.
I don't think they can do it.
Well, what do you mean? What else do they need? Right. That was the question we wanted to leave here with. What else do they need, or does this board need to make the
what the advice is about what they need to make the next steps, right?
Yeah,
that's the recommendations you need right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Are we in a position to create that recommendation or memo back yet to the town board?
Right.
Did you say this wasn't formally referred out to us yet?
No, it was. Yeah. Oh, absolutely
Okay.
it was. Yeah.
Well, I could be mistaken on that. It certainly could have been, but it's only been to the town board once so far. Okay, so they've seen it one time.
What, that was back in December? Is
Yeah,
that-
whatever. No, I think in this early summer, something like that.
Oh, in the summertime, okay.
That was
A
when
month
the
or two ago?
formal. That was when the formal referral occurred. We've been before the town board a couple times,
Okay.
but yeah.
Okay.
No, this is a formal referral to this board on the rezoning and the seeker.
It was
didn't
said
see one.
earlier that it's been with the town for 2 years.
That's-
So what's transpired during those 2 years?
Well, the
Plan changed.
yeah, the plan has changed.
Right, so-
The water course was identified, which
Right.
has changed a bunch.
So-
And then
The original plan that the applicant came with is not the same plan as here now. And is that due to what they found out in the field after going on at the site?
yes, that's correct.
So it's through
Yeah.
discovery that
Yeah.
this plan has changed. So it's not that the town has been holding anything up or not looking at anything.
Yeah, no one has said
Okay,
that. No one said that.
I
Yep.
just I want to make certain, so when we hear 2 years, that it's, it was put up there that it's been, believe it or not, 2 years it's been in front of the board. There's been things found in the field through investigation that have changed the plan to lead it to be here for 2 years at this point.
Yeah, the only way I would say is right. That's the natural course of a review, right? Is we've put the plan before the town. We've met with staff. We've met with your board. We've met with the town board. They've raised issues, questions which we've continued to answer. The question I'm asking now is we've gone through a couple of rounds of that. This board may not remember, but I think the last time we were before your board, I asked the same question. Hey, what issues are outstanding? And we got historic, I&I, recreation. That's why you've got all these new reports before you. So it's not as if this is a fresh start.
I get it, but it's the process.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Right, which continues.
right.
So,
So-
go ahead.
Go ahead, John, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, the other thing I wanted to mention is the historic aspect of the field home mansion and what the final disposition of that will be. You know, obviously, that has some historic planning issues, of course, historic preservation. Also, in the report, some of the things that are identified, and as Kevney had stated, that there is some interest in certain, maybe senior uses and things like that. So it is an actual land use planning issue. So that is
Is that building part of this site, though, or is it
it
just?
is currently part of this site.
It is.
Right. And as it stands right now, the applicant will donate that site to the town with,
So the part of what we're looking at here that's colored is the part of the residential, but the building that we're talking about is just.
Yeah,
below
the
that.
Probably
ultimately
just
the
right
proposal,
outside of that,
right,
yes.
ultimately the proposal would be to subdivide that piece off, the
That
field
one
home
building.
piece. Right.
I
Yeah.
got you,
Right.
okay. That's why I was confused, because it wasn't colored.
Because it
in
was,
there.
right, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. The focus is on
Yeah,
the site
okay.
plan.
so that's I think that's an important
Yeah, that's a bigger.
component to figure out what
Yeah,
to.
That's a bigger issue than
what
I
to do.
thought earlier in the conversation.
Right.
Not necessarily more important, but it's something that I wasn't focused on, the historical aspect of the building, something that we would have to go through.
Well, the proposal is to preserve it. We're
Right,
not gonna touch it.
yeah,
So,
okay.
Right, but once it comes to the town,
What do we
we
do?
need to be able to do something with it.
Right.
So that's what's important. And the experience of the town is sometimes those things can be taken with all good intentions, and for lack of a lot of things, you know,
Right.
it doesn't work out the way first anticipated.
And
So
that's
as
why
a
you've asked us
planner,
for.
I'd like
right.
to plan what happens to it.
Wait, let me, sorry. I'm laughing with you, but let me just say a little bit with tongue in cheek. That's why you've got the historic report,
Yes.
because we've had this conversation, I don't know what it was now, 6 months ago or so.
Yes.
You've asked for that, right?
Right.
The way you were presenting, John, and I know you were joking, is as if the applicant hasn't been listening to that.
No,
Every time you say it,
yeah,
we're trying to provide you with.
David, I want to say, they've done the report, they understand what our concerns are, they've been, very collaborative with it. I'm really speaking from the experience of the town, as it repeats itself, that oftentimes we'd like to do some things, we try to do some things, but for lack of foresight sometimes, on nobody's fault, it doesn't work out. So
Buildings
I
get
think it's an
knocked down.
important building, has a lot of history in the Field family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's opportunity, I think it should be looked at. I think it's an important aspect of the project.
So where are we with that then?
Right.
What else do you need from us?
Well, I just want to finish,
Let him finish.
just want to finish a couple things.
Discuss.
In terms of the landfill,
Hold on. No, wait.
I've read the report and am reminded by Kevney of what his consultants recommend at present, but I think as a matter of course, this will go to DEC, and DEC will make the conclusions of what it is and what needs to be done. I think it's going to be up to them, right? So,
Right, this is the 1,000 cubic yards of mulch and lawn material, right? You called it a landfill, now I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek myself, but you called it a landfill, but from a regulatory perspective, from a DEC perspective, it's not a landfill at all. It's not
I'm
even a
just-
mulch processing facility, right? The question was whether or not this material that was dropped is it potentially regulated? And so they went out and evaluated it and found that it was about 1,000 cubic yards
Right.
of mulch and lawn material.
Yep.
DEC regulations don't start regulating that type of material until it reaches 10,000 cubic yards. So this is way under that threshold. I'm sure it'll be
I
referred
know that-
over, but.
oh, yeah, I know what your conclusions are, and we've heard them. I'm just saying that, the final decision on what happens there will rest with DEC, I think. I don't think my department, and I don't speak for the engineering department, I don't think that they've been through the report in depth yet, so, I mean, there's that to happen quite yet, so. So I wanted to mention that. The other things, the stormwater is obviously important. A lot of regulations go along with that, so we can be guided by that. But again, back to the recommendations and timeline, I think again, it has to follow the steps that the town board is taking at the moment, so maybe there's some discussions that we have to have, and I'm sure that we will, just to make sure that we're all traveling at the same speed, you know, and know what each other's expectations are. I think that is a conversation that has to be constantly had, so that we're not going off, you know, into a rabbit hole or something, so.
So just, the town board hasn't made any
No.
decisions or anything like that. We're actually waiting on,
Oh.
we're actually waiting on, what's happening and what transpires here, of course. So we are working together, and his recommendations on the rec fees, nothing has been decided. No one has agreed to anything. And they're really, slightly different than what, aside from the extra, 50 grand, they're slightly different than what they had originally, proposed, which they had originally said. So nothing has really changed in terms of, and the town board hasn't made any decisions behind, you know, without consulting with you guys. That's why we referred it here.
Of course.
Just want to clarify that.
No, everything,
And I appreciate the extra 50,000, but it's pending their approval here.
We can't get back to you until we get a referral, so, or a recommendation,
Right.
so that's.
no, everything is going according to the normal process, so. But the process, again, is, you know, a rezoning, so recommendations, I think, in first order is, you know, what the determination is, you know, towards SECR, what other additional things that you may need or to see in order for them to make those determinations. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, we just,
Okay.
we just need to know what it is. I mean,
Right.
you know. Does the board have do they need anything else from us? I mean, you know,
Right.
what's,
I think what we need is for your group and Dan's group to kind of sit down, to come up with some kind of idea what that is.
happy to.
Because stormwater, you could design on site, right? Density, historical things, that all you could work through. Blowing up the sewer pump station, that's something that, you know, that's something you can't come back from. I think that's really where we have to focus our energies on at this point. So, I mean, I don't know how quickly you guys can get together, but I think for right now, we table this to the next meeting, till we see if there's some kind of answers we can get on at least that end. Because the rest of it, again, we've been through this many times here.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you don't leave with not having us answered your question. No, I don't want to just table it for another day and then,
Right.
and we're right back where we left off tonight. And, I don't know if there's information that we can give you that we haven't expressed somehow without going down a list. I mean, our normal review process, I think, is what you're expecting. I don't think there's anything unusual. You've cleared up a couple of things, as an example, the building being it's like a separate discussion by itself. To me, it's not part of the rezoning, it's a component of what your application is to us. But I don't, to me, that has a different impact on my consideration of whether this should be rezoned or not, to be honest with you. That's just my personal.
And I think what we need to know then is what information you need to make the determination. Is this worthwhile? Is this not? What because we're standing here as an applicant saying we're ready to answer all the questions. Give us the questions. We're going to answer them. And when it's presented to us, we have. Frankly, it does feel a little bit like, look, we're walking away from here tonight saying, I don't know what the next step is, other than I'm calling Dan in the morning and hopefully
That seems to be the
gets
critical
me.
path to us,
But,
us going forward as a town, going
Right.
forward. Because if he can't say what he needs to say to you, then we're at a dead end.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I was in that building maybe 20 years ago the last time, and it was an old building then, it's an old building now. I don't know what the town's uses for that could be. So to me, that's a separate question. But I think our normal review process of what you have up here is something we're used to doing all the time. So I don't think there's anything unusual for us to do, including looking at a historic nature of a building. So I don't know how to be more specific than, I mean, we go through traffic and we go through the normal things that we typically go through. So
it's all been submitted. All that's
Right,
already been submitted.
exactly,
Right.
yeah.
You say-
The question isn't what do you,
All that's been submitted where?
in the EAF and in those packets you've seen before you, that it's all in there.
All the environmental stuff has been submitted to us, in the materials we have.
Yes.
Same
Everything
stuff
that-
has went to the town board, I
Yep.
presume.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem I have is the open-endedness of the sewer water.
Let's put that one aside for a sec. 'Cause- yeah.
I can put it aside.
No,
but-
what I mean by that is, look, we all understand that's an open issue, so no need, that's on the list. That's
And it's
number one on the
critical.
list. Right, we get
Okay.
that. But the other pieces, from a secret point of view,
You can't answer that question. You can't assess the environmental impact of this project, given this current situation of the sewer system, can you?
what I'm saying is, if you assume that we're gonna be able to work that one out, when you don't have an answer as to how that's gonna be worked out yet, put that aside.
You don't.
What other impact? I'm not saying issue a neg deck tonight. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what else do you need from us, given the record that's before you? And I know I'm pushing, but the reason why I'm pushing is because if you look at the record, every time you've asked a question, we've answered it. We just don't want to, go in cycles and say, hey, listen, identify it all now so that we can answer them, so that we don't have to keep coming back and doing that.
Well, I think you said it earlier, you've been working very closely with professional staff, and there's been a back and forth, right? And I'm sure you guys do a lot of work in town. I know you follow a lot of the projects. You see the way this board works. All right? So, again, as I said earlier, there's things that could be engineered and fixed on site, and there's things that are probably beyond the applicant. This is one of those things that's beyond the project. So if you're asking us if everything else in there is something that could be worked on, I mean, as one member, I'm sure there's tweaking to it, but that is something that we can't get past. Because when you start dealing with the public works,
But they're not asking us to approve a site plan.
I understand it, but like you said, if we can't answer that question,
We can't give them the next step.
right?
Yeah,
So how do you,
so we can't do a memo yet.
I don't
Right.
think so.
Well, your memo
Say
can,
that.
your
We-
memo
yeah.
can list
Memo
what you
can-
think you
yes.
need.
What else, what other items you need, yes.
So I think, let's get that meeting going. In the meantime, we'll start to work through what our memo would be.
It's going back to the town board,
Right.
so it should, right now, we can write down all of the issues, the deficiencies that we identified tonight, send it back to them.
So I think, as you generally do, John, maybe we start working that memo up, right?
Yeah.
And get it to us. And in the meantime, you guys, the engineering minds meet, and we'll take it from there. Does that make sense?
Okay,
Okay?
that sounds like fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate the presentation.
We done?
Oh, sorry.
I'm just,
Do I have a motion to close the meeting?
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next meeting,
Oh, what? We talked about that earlier.
Which one?
again.
At the Albert Capolini Building, room 104. Thank you, Tom.